The parables that we have here at the end of the church year all end the same way: wailing and grinding of teeth, closed doors. And it got me thinking. This past July, I got an email from one of my students. Most of you know I'm a teacher. And this student got a C for his final grade and had missed a number of assignments over the course of the semester. He asked, "Mr. Eckert, would it be okay if I turned in those assignments now and got credit?" I said, "No." The door kind of closed on that. But I did go back and looked, made sure that I had counted everything and corrected everything and that I'd been fair. But I got back to him and I said, "The door is closed." Now, I'm not saying that he was wailing and grinding teeth, but he was whining quite a bit. But time does run out. There are moments where the time shuts down and it's no longer able to kind of repair the damage or regain what was lost. I'm sure some of you have run to get on an airplane, and before you get there, the doors close and the bridge goes back, and they say you'll have to wait for the next one. They're not going to call the plane back just for you. These parables are pretty, clear. Time runs out. If you remember back a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about, in Matthew chapter 23, these teachers who were really awful teachers. At that point, Jesus had been talking about the teachers and the leaders. But since that point, he's talking about you and I. He's talking about the disciples. He's talking about his followers. And so each one of these parables has a message for the followers. So last week, remember, there were 10 virgins. 5 had oil, 5 did not. 5 were able to come into the feast, and 5 were left on the wrong side of the door, wailing, grinding teeth. They had not used their stewardship of time very well. They had not recharged the oil for their lamps. They were not ready for the feast. They had let their faith run dry. They were not good stewards of time. This week, the term that's used is talent. Talent. 2 of the 3 lived out their talents. They invested their talents, and they were able to do great good with those talents. They entered into the joy of the master. They came to the feast. But the 3rd buried his talent. He was left on the wrong side of the door, the side where there's wailing and grinding of teeth. He had not been a good steward of his talent. Now, next week, we hear the story of the sheep and the goats. Some of you know that story. The sheep and the goats are judged based on how they used their talents. Did you feed the hungry? Did you give water to the thirsty? Did you welcome the stranger? Did you care for the sick? Did you visit the people in prison? Did you clothe the naked? The people who were the sheep invested their talents in such a way that they did great good. They enter into the feast. The others, the goats, they're left outside because they had refused to see Christ. They had refused to see God in the poor. And as Father said, the Holy Father is calling us to renew ourselves as Catholics in our care for the poor. 2 groups. One group that was able to be good stewards of their time, their talent, and their treasure. And another group, no, they had not been good stewards. My brothers and sisters, what's true for them is true for us. Each and every one of us has been endowed with a certain amount of time. And honestly, we don't know how long that time will be. A couple of years ago, when I was suffering from my heart attack, I thought that was my time. We don't always know when it will come, that moment when the door begins to close. but we can have a better chance of being on the right side of the door where we share the Master's joy, as opposed to the side of the door where there's wailing and grinding of teeth. And we can do that by listening to the advice of St. Paul. St. Paul tells us we are children of the light. We are children of the day. And when we allow that light to shine in us and through us, when we allow the day to guide us, we will be where we're meant to be, sharing the joy of the Master, being good stewards of our lives, whatever time we have. We're coming now to the end of our liturgical year. Next week is the Feast of Christ the King, and we enter into Advent. Advent is the perfect time for us to renew ourselves in the way we use our time, to refuel our lamps, to unbury the talents God has given us, and to use those talents for the good of the world, especially for the good of the poor. There'll be opportunities to pray, time. There'll be opportunities to serve, Eucharistic ministers, people caring for people who come to our family housing network. Our treasure will have a giving tree. Each of these ways during Advent is a way for us to become the disciples who share the joy of the Master and to find ourselves on the right side of the door. So my prayer for myself and for all of us who gather here this day, as this liturgical year ends, don't wait. You don't have to wait for Advent to begin to embrace what God calls us to embrace. Good stewardship of our time, of our talent, and of our treasure. God bless.